Welcome to the Code of Entry podcast, where we cloud the issues with facts and help you upskill to stay on the digital edge. Here's your host, Greg, with the latest.
Hey team, Greg here with your Code of Entry podcast. So I was looking through LinkedIn, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know I'm pretty engaged. And I was looking for topics for the podcast. So I got to LinkedIn a couple days ago, and I saw a post by one of the DoD innovators, at least name that, and they were trying to start the conversation of build or buy. Now, the reason they asked the question was they definitely have a bias towards buy. It was an acquisition organization. Their kind of claim to fame recently is on buying things for DoD rapidly, and that's fine. There's a time and a place, but focused, at the DoD level, they're a little bit high for some of the purchases they make, right? So you have somebody from DoD purchasing stuff for, use a phrase that was popular in the Iraq War, the strategic corporal, right? A very young junior person that has a disproportionate amount of influence strategically. Well, what happens is you have these DoD organizations like the DoD CIO, CDAO, and they go down and they find users that have a need and they fill that need. Well, that sounds great. The part that they're missing in the story is the fact that there's, a whole enterprise of systems that exist to fill that need, to document the capability gap, to get something to that user, that soldier, sailor, airman, marine, civilian that fills that gap. And what happens when these folks come on down from on high is they go right to that user, completely bypass everything else that exists, and they do it in a vacuum. Well, that means sometimes you don't get the best solution. Sometimes you don't get the fastest solution. You definitely don't get the cheapest solution. And it's all about value. And there's no way to really nest that in very good. And I think it's a problem that needs to be solved. But to not get on that soapbox, the question that they posed was really build or buy. And, I think it's hard to have a bias. Now, Congress told the government, a few years ago, hey, you shall buy. Don't make stuff. Don't do government off the shelf or GOTS. Don't do GOTS stuff. You need to be buying from industry. Okay. Well, we want to innovate, right? Did Uber buy their software from someone? They might have paid someone to make it, but they didn't go buy Uber. YouTube, Netflix, any of these software companies, right? So I think the interesting thing here is, we're not going to go out and buy lock, stock, and barrel a new fighter jet. We're going to have to build that. Now, we're going to ask industry to take on a lion's share of that and do innovation, but you have things like DARPA, and then leading into the labs, and then leading into the PMs, and then leading into units, right? You have different time horizons that are made for the Department of Defense through DARPA to do emerging technologies 5 to 10 years out. Let's really innovate and move tech forward. Then you've got labs that are focused more, say 5 years out. Then you have PMs that are like 2 to 3 years. Hey, in 2 to 3 years, I'm going to give you the next thing. And what's starting to happen is we're just buying stuff. We're buying computers that exist today. We're buying software licenses. We're like, oh, we put a Band-Aid on it, we're good. But we're never really innovating or getting to the root of that capability gap. So build or buy. I'm looking at this through the lens of developers that we really have in any company, but in this case, in the armed services. If you have a software product that you can make something in terms of days, weeks, months, and that's how you measure it, and you can make software, we should make it. If we can use open source components to put it together and then we integrate those, we should make it. Make it doesn't mean it's all from scratch and it's all custom and it's only GOTS, and we went back to Ada 95 and we wrote everything in Ada, which was a DoD language. We can use modern languages. We can use open source packages. We can provide a lot of capability by making. Now, buying, Hey, I'll cite specific examples here. If you're going to build a data system, during my career doing data systems, there was this belief that, hey, we should just go out to industry. They already have this solved. Nope. I'm here to tell you, absolutely it did not. Was there another enterprise in the world collecting, or that needed to collect, as much information to defend their attack surface as the DoD? The answer is no, resoundingly no. Oh, what about Apple? What about Google? No. So you have different use cases, different laws that people get applied to them, but depending on their industry and the government. Hey, guess what? They all apply. And you end up, okay, let's buy data systems. No, you can't do it. So let's build a data system. Okay, that's just something that can handle bringing the information in. Does that mean we need to make our own SIEM? No, industry has great SIEMs. We just need this central thing to integrate it all from. Always likened it to a body. Everybody's like, oh, we need smart tools today. Oh, we need AI. Hey, guess what? You get a lot of utility out of things that don't think. My hands do not think. My feet do not think. My eyes do not think. I have one thing that thinks and orchestrates the rest, and they can play valuable roles, even though they're not smart. So you start looking at, hey, should I build my own solution that does identity and access management? No, absolutely not. There's systems that have been designed that do that for the government, that do that for the commercial world. Let's find the one that works for us. Let's find the ones that unify them all. Take Okta for an example. Why would I go ahead and make my own system to enforce attributes-based access control, ABAC, when I could just go to Okta and be like, hey, can you do this? Oh, you do this? Great, let's do it together. By the same token, orchestration. So a lot of people mistake AI for automation. Not the same thing. There's really good automation software out there right now. So if I go back to my data platformism, hey, if I have all the information that's needed to make a decision, whether it's cybersecurity related or business related, I can automate that really easy with tools that exist. I don't want to make my own tool that has to have thousands of integrations for every piece of network hardware app that I have. There's apps that already have those integrations. Let's buy that piece and use it like a Lego block in our architecture. So it's not a build or buy. I think it's a build and buy, but we don't have very many technically educated folks that end up leading the procurement processes. And this is, civilian or government. You have to get there and you have to find leaders that can communicate vision to the C-suite and communicate it end to end in a way that makes sense. I've received increasingly less. You go back to 2016, 2017, 2018, people will be like, oh, cloud, that'll never be secure. We'll never use cloud. Oh, that's just a fad. For real? No. I haven't heard that in a long time, which is great. The next one was probably talking about cloud native versus cloud. Like, oh, yeah, we need everything in the cloud. And somebody would be like, well, I really want it cloud native. Oh, well, I also have a use case where it has to work on-prem, so I can't do cloud native. Cloud native is a non-starter. Like, I don't think you know what cloud native means. And they'd be like, well, I need to work in a disconnected environment. I need to have it on a computer so it'll still work. If I lose my internet connection, everything can't be in the cloud. And it's like, well, cloud native actually has 4 characteristics. It means that it's containerized, which is the most modern way to make applications. It means that I use DevOps or DevSecOps or SecDevOps, however you want to say it. It means that I use DevOps, that I use APIs and microservices in the architecture, and that I use a CI/CD pipeline for deployment. None of those define where it gets deployed. So cloud native, actually, big fan of it, but cloud versus cloud native was another big argument there. So then you get into this build buy, and it's like, oh, we're supposed to be buying from industry. Well, industry's not going to have a tailored solution for everything. And what happens when you buy is you go and you pick one vendor and you say, hey, I want to buy product X. I need you to make it do this. Instead of taking a consortium approach and being like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. I've got the information that the government already owns in a place. Let's go to X, Y, and Z and pull them together and take this approach. And maybe Y isn't a vendor. Maybe Y is an open source product. Maybe Z is something that assembly line worker made and it works great to increase productivity. But we kind of have this gap in the ability to communicate insights to leaders and have leaders understand. So it's that the other thing I was going to get there is we also have to try as leaders, so talking to maybe a different cross-section of the audience here, as leaders, we have to work to understand the technology. Time and time and time again, after I got past the cloud thing, after I got past kind of the cloud native thing, it was always comments like, oh, well, this data stuff, it's too hard. This cloud stuff, it's too hard. Oh, I don't even know what we're talking about these days. Okay, as professionals, if it can increase efficiency, if it can increase your performance, then you should take the time to learn it, particularly if you're in a decision-making position over it. If you're a technical advisor, try to distill down as much as you can, but that glossary, those terms you need people to know, we should be working hard to increase that literacy. And so it's funny, I kind of get a case of the syndrome of like, crabs in a pot. They're all pulling each other down to try to get to the top. I think the Army breeds that. Maybe it's true other places. But sometimes it's hard to look and see, hey, people are doing a good job. Let's lift them up versus pulling them down. You can be very cynical sometimes looking around and being like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. But hey, the advent of data literacy courses, hey, while I don't necessarily agree with everything that's taught in them, I applaud that there's data literacy courses going on. I applaud that people are making the effort to become data centric. Because if we can get to data centricity, we can get towards a systems of systems approach to solving problems. And then we get out of the, oh, this is a wicked problem, it's unsolvable. We get to decompose the problem into solvable parts and iterate through getting better and not waiting for perfect and getting better because we understand that we have the data and we can get better and we don't have to wait for lock, stock, and barrel a solution that comes. We can continue to iterate, make it better, buy, build, whichever, but we're not locked into doing either. And it's not an either or. It's not a versus. It's the and or, like what's the right way to solve a problem. So just 2 cents on a build or buy from a LinkedIn post there. So like to say terminology, if you want a glossary, there's a really good actually post on data mesh / data fabric from Martin Fowler. There's a book by, I think her name's Degani. I've never met her. And she wrote this book on data mesh. And so now the Army's acquisition principal has read this book and it's become the big thing in the Army is data mesh. Okay, great. So that article by Martin Fowler really will take that O'Reilly text and distills it down into like a 5-minute read. And you can get a lot of people much more savvy on what the words mean very quickly. Other than that, I think on terminology, something I'm trying to push for is kind of the idea of sky computing, where, all right, we keep adding tags to stuff, data, hashtag fog, hashtag fabric, hashtag mesh, hashtag. Hey, we don't need all these addendums. And I know you're using hashtag inappropriately. My kids would tell me right now. So if we look at sky computing, which, I'm not making up something from scratch. I normally don't like new terms. UC Berkeley actually started using the term in the late 2000s. Never caught on, but they have a school of computing, sky computing, whatever. But if you think of it encompassing everything from the sky down, right? It's the cloud, it's the on-prem, it's the hybrid approach. It's everything you need for zero trust. It gives us a chance to start again and reframe this discussion. Because if we keep just extending cloud terms, which, when cloud started, they were somebody else's virtual machines. Not necessarily the case now, because now we have private clouds and we have hybrid clouds and we have edge clouds and forward clouds and I don't know what kind of clouds. Then we started talking about data. It's like, oh, I have data. well, we're going to do data munging, data cleaning. Then we move past those terms and we're data parsing and data lexicons and data catalogs and data governance and data stewards. Awesome. More and more data terms. And as we continue to compound, we haven't taken a step back to look at everything and just kind of redefine it lock, stock, and barrel. I know I've used that twice. We haven't redefined the landscape to say, okay, we're going to use this overarching term. Then we're going to define part of it as a cloud. We're going to define part of it as on-prem. Then this cloud native part, this is what it really means, and you can deploy it anywhere. King for a day, a lot of these build-buy discussions get dissolved down into the, okay, what capability do you need? Where are you going to deploy it? What's its form factor? Is this hardware? Is it software? Okay, if it's hardware, do we already have hardware that does that or no? Okay, we need hardware. We don't need hardware. Is it software? Great. Is it a virtual machine or is it a container? Okay, can it live in one of these locations? Do we have the data that it needs to be successful? Does its data get shared to other capabilities that might be able to use it? Okay, and can the user access it and know how to drive it? That's most of the questions that you would need to ask. So when you're thinking build, buy, think about the capability you need. Think about the skills that you have in your formations and your companies. Think about, hey, are there open source things? Can I take something that's free? Do I need to pay a company to make something for me? Is there something that I can buy that's good enough and it's not exorbitantly expensive? I think you can make some good progress. And I did with kind of past the money part. And sometimes part of the buy conversation that kind of got me bristly in previous years was, it was always, oh, well, just go buy X. But X had a pricing model that would take our entire budget. It becomes unfeasible. Might have been a great capability, but they can price themselves out of the market. So people are like, I can't believe you're building something that's just like that. Okay, not just like it. I can't believe you're building something just like that. Just go buy it. Okay, I can build it in 6 months, or I can pay for it for a month and not be able for the license fee and it all disappear. So holistic problem solving, always my thing. Breaking down a problem so that it's solvable, systems approach. Yeah. So I appreciate you listening to me on the Code of Entry podcast here as I talked about build or buy. Keep hustling.
Thanks for listening. Find us on social media at Code of Entry and online at codeofentry.com. Check back for new episodes or join the team by signing up for notifications. Until next time, keep hustling.